All right. So in case you guys don't know, these are three of the very top venture capitalists in Europe, representing three very different firms. They were all three of them on the Forbes Midas List Europe of the top 25 European investors just yesterday. And PJ was actually number 2 on the list, which is pretty impressive. And I thought, you guys may not have heard of their firms, but you've definitely heard of the companies that they've supported, that they've been on the boards of, that they've invested in. So if the three of you don't mind, maybe just telling us a bit of how big your firm is and a couple of those household companies that the audience would know that you work with. So we'll start with you, PJ.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. We are Northzone. We've been around for 22 years, investing and supporting entrepreneurs in almost 200 companies. The most well-known are obviously Spotify, but also iSettle, which is one of the payment successes coming out of Europe. And prior to that, also the world's largest online classified site, Avito, out of Moscow, and some other pretty notable companies.
Cool.
I'm Reshma Sohoni, co-founder and partner at Seed Camp. We are Europe's seed fund. We're investing out of a 60 million fourth fund. We have 300 companies in our portfolio. Probably you're all out there using Revolut, TransferWise, and a very non-sexy company called UiPath. We try to be your first check-in. So if you want, if you want that first check from us, come find one of us. We're here all week.
Great. I'm with Excel. Excel is a global venture capital firm focused on early stage investing. We've got 3 main offices, one in Palo Alto, California, where we got started 35 years ago, one in London and one in Bangalore. Companies that we've been involved in include Facebook, where we were the first institutional investor way back in 2005. Supercell in Europe and Flipkart in India, and a whole host of new companies, including Slack.
Awesome. Everyone in the audience, pay attention. Raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur or thinking of starting a business in the future.
Good.
Okay, a lot of people. So VCs, should they raise money from European investors, or are they going to have to go to California eventually to get their money?
I think maybe I'll kick off. So I think, early stage, there's never been a better time in Europe. And early stage capital tends to be a combination of local and a bit of international with some key centers like London or Paris or Berlin, right? So, and capital markets right now are thriving. It's a really exciting time to be based in Europe and start in Europe. And I think especially in some sectors that, we know really well, fintech, insurtech, health, a couple other sectors, it's the best place globally to start a business. So I think if you can get that capital in Europe, you can really scale to a place where the likes of Northzone and Excel are interested in you. So you can definitely stay in Europe.
I think you have also all the reason to choose a partner that is close to you. You will be camping together for maybe 7, 8, 9 years. Now, we were in Spotify for 10 years, and that's something that really is a working relationship that becomes really, really important, both for the VC, but probably even as important to the entrepreneur. And if you make the right connection and have access to that relationship, that can really help your business scale a lot.
Yeah, and in the case of Excel, you can actually have the best of both worlds. So we're based in London, so we're close to where you are, but we're very much integrated in the US as well. So especially for enterprise software companies, for whom the #1 market is the US, we can really help you locally and in the US.
So I think 16 members of the top 25 on our list were from London. So I don't know how much longer we can call those European investors. And 2 of the 3 of you are based in London. PJ, you're obviously based in Stockholm. For the audience members here who are not also based in London, do they need to be going there to meet investors like you, or how should they be thinking about the European ecosystem in other places as well.
Yeah, but we try to be in all our key markets, which is the UK, France, Germany, Nordics, and Israel, probably every quarter. So we organize dinners, we organize drinks, but we cannot be there all the time. So the best place to catch us is in London, but we're out in the market most of the time, and I may live in London, but I'm in Europe most of the time.
I mean, one of the key jobs early on is raising money. That's one key job of a CEO, along with hiring brilliant talent. So you have to be open to wherever that money is and go close to it. That said, Europe is in a unique position where you have 27 capitals vying to be the #1 spot. And certainly with Brexit, there's a huge opportunity to take on that #1 spot. And I think every major city and the mayors and prime ministers are busy copying each other, which is the absolute right thing to do. So there is a lot of local capital angels, local VCs, and they're extremely well connected to the centers of capital as well. That said, you have to be flexible, and that's part of being a great CEO, is being flexible.
I couldn't agree more. And locally, in most of the European technology hotspots right now, there is a very well-developed infrastructure for everything from seed financing to Series A and such. And they are pretty much all very well docked into the larger VCs like ourselves, and we have almost daily contact with those. And we serve on boards together. So it's a very tightly knit network of people who have been working together for a long time, to the benefit of the entrepreneurs, I think.
And just one thing, because there's been a little Twitter thing going on between the people who are on that list yesterday. We are all dual passport holders, at least, if not, three or more passports. So I think we all found ourselves in London a decade ago because that was absolutely doing the right things in terms of encouraging an ecosystem. But no doubt about it, all of us speak multiple languages and are from very different parts of the world.
Awesome. So the companies that your firms are known for are companies that you invested in years ago. Spotify probably almost 10 years ago now, or about that.
Yeah.
And the same thing for your companies as well, whether it's Supercell with Excel or iZettle and Revolut. What looks different with the new crop of companies? Because VC, we celebrate the mature, older ones, but with the young companies that we may not have heard of yet, what differences are you seeing?
Well, one of the big things that's happening right now, I think, is that enterprises are completely reinventing themselves. They're all afraid of this Amazon or Google moment in which their industry will be disrupted, and they say, we need to digitize ourselves. So a lot of these organizations are going through digital transformations, and what that means is that there's many opportunities for new software companies to be created in Europe. And what we're seeing right now, in fact, is that that's happening all over the place. So in France, in Germany, in the UK, there's many really interesting software companies being created, which was previously not the case, because most startup companies in the past, the successful ones here in Europe, were consumer internet businesses.
Also, there's a lot of pressure on costs. So I think you take verticals like health and agriculture and financial services, et cetera. There's huge pressures on reducing your cost basis. So a lot of developments in AI, blockchain, if it makes sense, can reduce that to a great extent and is really great infrastructure to build on. So, added to that point is all those verticals are extremely ripe for disruption, and they are very kind of local to the European footprint, and there's a massive market to go after.
Yeah, 20 years ago, we invested in startups that sold software to banks. Now we're investing in companies that are replacing banks. That's like 1,000 times a bigger market, and banks is not the only one under attack here. It's like pretty much all the industries. And what we're seeing now is that instead of being disadvantaged as a small company, you actually have more access to capital, you at lower cost, and you have more access to talent, and you can actually build a cost structure that's much more competitive and gain customers that are sick and tired of their old relationships. So it's a phenomenal time to start companies right now.
How important is it for a startup to be sort of located, either originally or eventually, near its biggest customer base. So I live in New York, and historically, we've seen good commerce businesses, financial services, businesses. And then you might say, oh, well, Helsinki and Finland is great for gaming, right? And we kind of have these associations. Is that still the case, and is that still important?
I think, at least in enterprise software, and by the way, we do much more than just enterprise software, but in enterprise software, you got to be where the big customers are. Every dollar out of $2 that gets spent on software is spent in America. So if you want to be an globally important software company, you got to locate your commercial headquarters where the key customers are, which is the US. Now, in online games, people are everywhere, so it doesn't quite matter where you're located.
So enterprise software entrepreneurs here based in Europe might have to think about New York or something like that.
Yeah, and please come to us early. We can help you get there and recruit a great team.
Reshma, would you agree with Harry?
Yes and no. I mean, I think consumer absolutely. I think you want to be close to where you can get scale on distribution. So whether that you can manage that remotely, that's possible as well. On enterprise, I think early you're trying to, it all depends on stage. And so early stage, you're really trying to figure out how to get traction in the first place. And I think if you spend a lot of your time and energy and building talent in Europe, it takes time to go to the US, and you have to do it with great partners. So I think rushing in is also the wrong choice, right? So I think you have to be very conscious and thoughtful of when that right time is, and often we see one of the co-founders has to move because that culture needs to go with you. So it can't necessarily just be done in a rush.
I think that many companies can actually thrive where they are, and they don't necessarily have to move as long as they have access to talent, and that is typically the big issue. Especially if the tech ecosystem is relatively new and hasn't really had the time to multiply itself and to produce a number of big companies and successes that sort of feed back to itself. But I certainly see, for instance, we have invested in Barcelona over the past few years, and that's an ecosystem that was nowhere 10 years ago, and it's really starting to happening. It's happening here in Lisbon, and I think that just goes to show that the world that is powered by cloud and where there is access to infrastructures thanks to social media and all kinds of stuff just makes it possible to be successful in a way that was never the case just 10 years ago.
So whenever I do a talk like this, recently the VCs say there's more money than ever before, there's lots of capital out there, and then entrepreneurs come up to me and say, well, how do I get that money? So for people, especially if they're based in Lisbon or Spain, or they're not maybe in one of these traditional hubs, how do they get on the radar of VCs like yourselves so they can maybe get on that path like the companies we eventually hear about?
Well, from our perspective, first of all, come early. So don't wait till you're bigger, but come when you're a small company. And then I used to be an entrepreneur myself, and I know it looks very daunting to find money in this community. But the best way of doing it is to find someone, as they say in the movies, find a guy who knows a guy. So find someone who has some relationship, and everybody has somebody like that. Either it's a friend who is an entrepreneur who was funded by a venture capital firm, or a service provider such as a lawyer, because every company needs to be incorporated anyway. There will be some connection, and if you just get a slightly warm intro, you will get noticed.
We actually have a blind pool in terms of how we accept companies for investment. So you get on our website and there's type form, and we ask some very specific questions. But we're not forcing companies to move to London. of course we'd love it, but that's how we found our companies in Portugal and in Estonia and Romania and other places, is just coming through blindly, not knowing anyone, and that's our sort of pre-seed investment pool. And then on the seed side, we do work our network a lot, and the founders work their networks to reach us. But we absolutely believe in that, lone founder or small team sitting somewhere in some small city or town, getting to us and opening that
arena.
up. Or arena.
Yeah, I think it's very much a person-to-person business, and it takes a while to build a relationship and to really understand what if we work well together. And so start early, just as Harry said, and don't be afraid to reach out, because that's exactly what we expect and we hope to, because that's what we live of, to interact with entrepreneurs.
So my last question is, I'm curious, what would be the most unexpected place that you all have been impressed by a company so far in recent years?
Well, the most unexpected for me was Minsk in Belarus, the last dictatorship in Europe. So that was my most, and we just funded a business based in Perm, Russia, beyond the Urals. So that's as far as we ventured.
I mean, Ljubljana 10 years ago was, nowhere in the tech scene, so...
And Umeå, up by the Arctic Circle, and I guess that's what they do during the dark time of the year.
So obviously you can start a great business and get noticed by these top VCs from anywhere. So hopefully that's inspiring for the audience. And thank you all for these insights.
Thank you.